It's showtime, Lloyd. Did you ever think that there'd be a time where people yelled at you, showtime, and you'd be on stage?
Never imagined it.
Well, here you are on your own show, Why Wells Fell. We talk about all the things that go on with birthing a well that's going to do the shareholders proud, capture all the carbon it can. But there's a particular way we need to go about it, and it's called the refined way. Today, we're going to talk about water. The other day, I saw this post about water has a memory. And then we were talking about the episode today. And water is the thing that is a very integral part to your process. It keeps finger on the pulse, knows if you're keeping your promises. What's going on with the water, Lloyd?
Well, you said you'd seen some advertising where water has a memory, and really, the things that water comes in contact. I remember my chemistry professor in high school asked the question. I think it might have even been the first day. What is water? Everybody's like H2O. And the answer is it's the universal solvent. And when you look at water, it tells you, it's kind of like your blood. It'll tell you what it's come in contact with and what it's holding in suspension. And you have all these companies. Do you like Aquafina better than Dasani, or do you like Smart Water, or do you like these different what is liquid death, and all these different, well, all of them have a different component that's within them. And the thing about our process and what we're looking at, the thing that disrupts equilibrium is water. We're utilizing water, and we're putting a bunch of different things into it to help us frack a well. And back when we were smart chemical, we had a trademark, water is everything, and we bought that trademark, by the way. And now water is everything is a trademark of refined completions. And again, it goes back to the basis that with water being a universal solvent, and I love this, whoever's marketing plan or whatever they're talking about, water having a memory, water shows us what has happened. It's really pretty cool when you look at the produced water that's in an oil and gas well. You can see all the components that's in seawater because it was originally seawater, and it's what we call an evaporite. That it's a concentrated salt water that has been stored with this hydrocarbon in this rock for millions of years. So yeah, it tells you what was there a long, long time ago. Understanding the differences, that what we put in the well to frack it with and how different it is from the water that is naturally residing in that well, helps us measure the promise that we give through the Pathfinder process. And that's the key thing that is unique and the major differentiator. When other companies provide you a product, they sell you their product and say, it's, hey, you're going to make a better well. What do they do after the well's completed? How do they tell you what is their metric, other than arbitrarily saying, yeah, you're making more oil, which, hey, that's the name of the game. But how do you know that you predicted what was going to happen? And how do you measure that prediction? It's in the water. Water is everything, and water tells us and gives us the ability to measure over an extended amount of time the impact that we've had on the well, and whether or not we allow it to remain in a disruptive state for the life of the well, or is that disruption mitigated and put into a place of dynamic equilibrium that still allows us to remove the oil and the gas, but also to remove the water that was what we put down there from the frack, and to recover that. And so, one of the things is, and it's especially in the formations of the Permian Basin, we got to get that water back, because if we leave it in there and it imbibes itself into the geology, and that is the catalyst to going back into a state of equilibrium. Well, that point locks the hydrocarbon in place, and it doesn't allow us to have a higher producing, longer producing, lower cost producing oil and gas well. And so that's what we recognize. Water is the key indicator. It's the KPI, and the quantities of water that we need to get off of it before we see oil. There's another KPI there. So we have all these predictors. And what's funny, if we went to a different geology, like one in the Marcellus, which is a very different type of geology, the water actually staying in the reservoir actually mobilizes more hydrocarbon and gets it out. And so it's really understanding the difference, what we're trying to preserve, and how we're impacting equilibrium, and therefore water's everything.
There's so much that goes on. I remember I was waiting tables one time, and this guy was, I don't know if he was pulling my leg or what, but he's telling me he was a scientist. And I remember one statement he told me that shocked me, was that water would eventually dissolve a diamond.
That's true. It's a universal solvent.
Yeah.
Over time and temperature.
And so, I think about, I see my granite cabinets, and I think about your conversation, how you're going in there and we're getting water, and we're cracking that up, and we're putting all this pressure and heat, and there's all these things going on. And from my eyes, it's just like, what could go on? It's so solid, but it's crazy that what you're releasing from there, and where it needs to go around and come through and not be too soggy, not be too acidy or whatever, right?
Right. Yep. It's pretty funny. The other thing is one of the things when you're learning about corrosion, and you would think distilled water, it's the purest form of water, right? Well, distilled water, because it's in its natural state, it doesn't exist as a distilled product, except closely in a raindrop. But there's still acid gases, things that have gotten into that. But you put a nail in an open container of distilled water, and you're going to see something rust and corrode like that, because it has such an ability and desire to break that nail down. It's really a unique process. But you take it and you put it into a tap water, and then you take it and put it into seawater. You're going to watch them all corrode, but they're all going to do it differently based on what's in the water. And that's something that we learned. You can put different components in there, and you can keep that nail from ever even corroding. And there's tests that we do all the time that help us understand how to make these metal goods that help us, like pipe and pumps and tanks, how we keep them intact over time, because the water that we're producing, generally the oil is not corrosive to metals, but you put the oil with water and then acid gases and other materials, it becomes really corrosive. And so that's part of the uniqueness about our process. If we leave the geology intact in a place of dynamic equilibrium, we mitigate the corrosivity of that water as it's produced by it. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, so you're putting that nail in that distilled water, and what's happening is it's wanting to get to equilibrium. It's wanting to, so it's stealing what's in the nail to balance out what it's missing inherently. And so my mind is going that way. When we're pumping water down into some formation, there's all these variables that are trying to get to that dynamic equilibrium you're talking about.
Well, and the funny thing is you have an open jar of distilled water. It's going to start imbibing oxygen and CO2 from the atmosphere. And you can measure that distilled water, the pH of that water, from when you've just taken it out of the distillation unit and put it in that jar, and then measure it over time, and the pH is going to drop. If you don't put anything in there, no nail or anything, just let it stay open, and it's dropping because it's absorbing until it gets to its solubility limit, the amount of oxygen and CO2. And so there's all these thermodynamics that happen with the fluids that we're doing. That's why the pressure matters when we're looking at bringing stability to the reservoir. That's why the time matters. How long is that water that we've put on that rock stay there? And what is the disruptive forces? And then for us, how do we measure the impact and utilize the constant that we discovered to measure the fact that we're keeping our promise? And so, we continue to service our customers' wells for up to 12 months post-completion. There's nobody else that does that unless they're selling production chemicals, but there's not a company that's completely dedicated to technology for completions like us that does that kind of work. So we do an immense amount of work up front to understand what those properties are going to be. We make a prediction, we make a prescription, and then as the well produces, we keep our promise. And that's really the 4 Ps of why to do business with refined completions. We predict, we prescribe, we produce, and we promise. And there's nobody out there that's doing that. By the way, you need to put that on our website, Steve, as you build that out.
All right. So the thing is, all the rest of the wells being produced with whatever off-the-shelf solution is you're producing hydrocarbon. But how do you know if you're getting an optimized well that's producing the most hydrocarbon? And so I really liked what you said. Produces longer, produces more, produces longer, and produces less. I forgot how you put it, but the destructive aspect of it. But those are 3 big deals that you're measuring, other than just let's see what happens.
Yeah, and that was, that was always my partner Jeff Snyder. That was been always our battle with. You have all these laboratory tests that you do, but none of them can you translate and say, oh, this is how we're going to measure what we did. And you're sitting there looking at all of, and they're not bad tests, they're just incomplete. We still utilize quite a few of those as an indicator. And what they do is they have to build on yes all the way through. The answer has to be yes to all of them, but then you have to have the ability at the end of all those protocols. We created the equilibrium protocol that is a summation that provides prediction. And it is absolutely translatable to what we see in the field.
So in the corporate world, let's say we're applying the same thinking to a business problem. What's a comparable business problem? How's it aligned? Because what's striking to me is that now all of a sudden we're down in this dark hole, and we're actually applying business principles instead of, hey, this part of this whole investment, we're just guessing.
Well, I mean, one of the medical, right? If you've got high cholesterol and you take a statin, and after so long you go back in, you get your blood checked, and your LDL's gone from 150 to 100, and that's what they predicted by taking this, right? They prescribed it.
Mm-hmm.
you've got the proof. Same thing with dietary changes. If you think about it, Steve, the proof's a lot of times on the scale, right? You used to weigh this, but now you weigh this. I love that, on a DEXA scanner with my doc, one of the things, in the age management process, he's like, yeah, you may be losing weight, but are you losing muscle? And what is your ratios? You've got to be able to measure. And so those are some real life things that, and a lot of them come back to a lot of the natural laws. They're working within those same type of processes in the science that we're applying here in very close parallels between our personal health and the health that a well has over its life.
I think what's interesting in this story about the water is, this is a legacy outcome, of a process your father started.
Oh, absolutely. Which is, man, that's kind of crazy. It's crazy, but if you think about it, Steve, we're all standing on the shoulders of so many people. In one of my blogs, I talk about the law of compounding, and just the fact that you and I are sitting here, we're results of the law of compounding. There's just the things that have been learned over thousands of years, really. There's universal truths, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we continue to bang our head against and go, is it really universal? And yeah, it's universal, right? And compounding is one of the greatest ones. And that's when we're looking at it, how do we take what we've learned over all these years and apply it in a manner where we're not trapped in our old thinking? We've learned from it. We've been made better. We've made assumptions based on old things, but we've learned new ways to apply foundational truths, natural laws, and then apply them in a new way. And that's really who Refined is. That's what we do. If we ever stop, we got to change our name, because being refined is a never-ending process.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like I told you to ask about the uniqueness of our colors, right?
Yes.
Well, if you've ever seen a flame and it's burning red, fire's red and it's smoking a lot, there's a lot of impurities in that, right? An oil fire versus a gasoline fire versus a propane. And the impurities give off color. H2S, when it burns, it's really can be very red. But if it's hyper pure H2S, it'll be really blue. So our colors are the transition. The orange to red and red to orange, then to blue, is burning out the impurities. That's our refining process. And the blue is the purity of the process and the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of always improving. And that's why we have the differentiating colors within our logo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the refined process. You've learned. I remember you talking. It's like we wanted the water to be this way, and then later we learned, we wanted it to be distilled, and then it was like, but you were seeing the negative effects of those, and now we're in a more of a balance.
Because we didn't know it was a negative effect. We had different beliefs,
right,
back then. We used to think dilution was the solution, and that's why we wanted a higher purity of water to go in, because we thought the dilution of the geology was enhancing the production of the geology. Well, it was just the opposite. It's kind of like, you a Seinfeld fan?
Yes.
George Costanza, he had all the success by doing the opposite of what he really wanted to do. Well, there's a lot to be said about that. Sometimes we're blinded by what we've always been doing, and we're in that trap that we're getting, why am I continuing to get the same results? Well, we're in that trap of doing the same thing over and over again. That's insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, it's the same thing as what we do in business. Is it's funny, a lot of the promises that we hear chemical companies make today are the same ones that were made 10 and 12 years ago. And people are buying it. You want to know why? Because the people aren't the same people. It's new people hearing an old story that they don't know that failed. Mm. And that's really, if you think about it, it's the consistency in history. Is we teach history not to repeat it, but what we end up finding out is that, they can't have done it as good as us. It's kind of the evil of socialism and communism. It's just never been done right. And it takes out of the equation the human factor and the desire to be better. And it also says, the evil of it is the saying we're all the same. It wants to put us all in a box, and that goes directly against God and the uniqueness of his creation, the uniqueness of each of us. We've got the same last name, but we're very different in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. But and it's why we look at what we're doing in the completion area for oil and gas wells. Is we don't want to be blind, and we don't want to treat every well, every geology as if it's the same, because it's not. And the conditions that it's been under millions of years are so different. And why would we say there's one solution for all of these all over the world? Well, we don't. We treat them all unique. And that's why we do the work up front, and that's why we have the follow through post completion.
And you're using all this data that you've collected over the years, and using the AI to make sure you're avoiding any bias that comes.
That's exactly right. Matter of fact, I just had a call this morning, and this afternoon we're looking at an immense amount of data, and you talk about all this, but we're not, we're having to learn to practice this. We've never done it before. And so we're now going back and regenerating that data, not regenerating, but utilizing that old data, and to put it into an absolute picture of being able to show, hey, this is stuff that we were doing 7-8 years ago that was close to being what we know today. It's not exactly, but you can see the migration, the transition from where we were smart to now where we're refined. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, it hits me. It's kind of my personal transition of being a person that knew it all to now I'm a recovering know-it-all, and I have a lot of curiosity. And I'm a Ted Lasso fan too, right?
Yeah.
His statement is stay curious, Well, we need to stay curious. And if we do, we'll continue to have new discoveries and continue to get better.
Yeah, totally. The power in using that AI, I say, is always how creative your question, your what if question that you present to it is like, well, if you ask this shallow question or this superficial question, it's going to give you this real quick answer, kind of expected.
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you say that, knowing your why, and Simon Sinek, start with why. And if you've ever gone through his process and you've ever taken somebody through the iteration, you start with, all right, Steve, why ROI? And you say, because this. But I go to the fifth level of asking you that why and getting real clarity of why you created your company. I've yet to have anybody be in a place that they were not so emotionally touched because it resonated with the core of who they are. That's part of the process that we have. I don't know that we have to do, but that's our desire, is to continue to ask why this, why that, why. And that's curiosity, right?
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Real cool.
These, thinking of an old industry being informed by new processes, being refined, learning and talking about why wells fail. Lloyd, if someone's been listening, they want to talk to you, they're curious and they want to talk to you, how do they connect with you?
Lloyd.Brown at refinecompletions.com. Refinecompletions.com, like you've got it flashed up here, or through the channel that they're watching us at, either LinkedIn, X, or YouTube.
Yep. All right. Good job as usual. We'll see everybody at the same time next week. And we'll have another great episode of Why Wells Fail. We'll talk to you then. That's a wrap.